how this has to work. So there's no such thing as good morning. There's no such thing as what's up. There's no such thing as how you doing. Christos anesti.
Alessos anesti.
Christ is risen. Al-Masihu qam. That's going to be the extent of my Arabic. Bechristos avtom. Okay. So I hope everyone is doing well. This is the first Sunday of the Holy 50 Days. I kind of call this like the sleepy Sunday. This is the Sunday where if you make it to this Sunday, you're really focused on continuing the resurrection. Most people, they had their resurrection last Saturday and they're hanging out a little bit and giving themselves a breather, right? So this is the sleepy Sunday usually, which is sad because it really is an amazing Sunday. 8 days from the resurrection. And just think about the experience that we have. We have an apparition, Christ appearing to the disciples. We earn a believer in the resurrection. Thomas, who said, "I will not believe unless I see and touch the print in his hands." So we earn a believer in the resurrection. And most importantly, Christ continues to minister to his disciples, rebuilding the hope and the faith that they lost in his crucifixion. And he continues to fill them with joy and hope through the power of that resurrection. And yet, what do we obsess over today? Doubting Thomas, right? Doubting Thomas. Thomas, always doubting. Haram, Thomas, how could you do that? And yet, if you think about it, Thomas gets his own special experience with God. Okay? Peter and John ran to the tomb after Mary Magdalene told them what was going on. But they didn't see Christ by themselves. They went to an empty tomb. Okay? Mary Magdalene experienced Christ. Why? She went to the tomb and she asked to see her Lord. Tell me where you have laid him. Right? Thomas is no different than St. Mary Magdalene in that sense. He said, "Show me my Lord. Show me my Lord." And so we bash on Thomas for his lack of faith, and we will talk about that lack of faith. But that being said, Thomas is pretty awesome in the sense that he desperately wanted to see his Lord. He desperately wanted to see his Lord. And so Thomas doesn't just see Christ one way in this gospel. He experiences him three ways. And so we're going to talk about the three ways that Thomas experiences Christ in this gospel. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how we, as Thomas, as types of Thomas, can experience Christ the way Thomas did. Because the gospel is never just for the story, but it is for the soul and how we live what we read. Okay? And so the first way that Thomas experienced Christ in this gospel is through the manner of speech. Through the manner of speech. Okay? And so if we go back through the gospel and we read it, we read that, what did Thomas say? He said, "Unless I see him and believe, I see him and touch him, I'm not going to believe." And then Christ comes to Thomas. Christ comes to Thomas and the disciples. I'm going to read it specifically. And he says, "And after 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the door being shut, and stood in the midst and said, 'Peace to you.'" Okay? So he spoke to the disciples and said, "Peace to you." But what happened before he said that? What happened before he showed up? Thomas asked to see him. Thomas asked to see him. And so what we learn just very specifically from Thomas in this moment is that we learn to articulate or communicate our wants in order to get them. It's like anything else in life. If I'm hungry, I need to ask for food, right? If I'm tired, I need to ask to go to bed. If I need to go to the restroom, I need to ask to go to the restroom, depending on where you are, right? So you ask for things that you need. And then when he spoke to his disciples, he spoke to them with peace. He spoke to them with peace, okay? And the entire gospel is a gospel of letting or disarming the disciples, continuing to give them peace. And so in our own lives, I would ask us the question, do we ask Christ to speak to us? Do we ask him to speak to us? I said this story last week during Covenant Thursday, how Samuel was hearing God's voice in the temple. And he went to Eli and he said, Eli, I hear God. What do I do? And he said, tell him, speak, Lord, your servant hears. Okay? And so there is a power in asking God to speak to us, asking God to speak to us the way that Thomas asked for Christ to speak to him and to let him touch him. In our lives, we must ask Christ to manifest himself if we want to see him, okay? God is not just going to drop down on your doorstep and show up and say, hey, here I am. What do you need? That's not how it works. He's always with us, okay? But just like when you're in your home with your family and, people have their own things going on, God is there, and he's waiting for you to talk to him. He's waiting for you to come to him and to say, I need you. I look for you. I desire you. I crave a relationship with you. So how do we do this? How do we talk to God? This is the easiest of the points. It's simple. To live a true life of prayer. A true life of prayer. Okay? And to make that even more specific, I encourage everyone here, if you don't do it, pray every day. Once a day. Even if it's Our Father, even if it's over 5 minutes, even if it's over dinner, don't leave a day without prayer. Don't leave a day without a chance to speak to him. Because it's when we speak to God that we feel we can take everything we carry and we put it in the only place that it can be carried. I'm going to say that again. When we talk to God, we take what we carry and we put it in the only place that it can be carried, in the hands of the Father. Okay? In the hands of the Father. And in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 33, verse 3, the prophet says, God says through the prophet, call to me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you do not know. Do you wonder where your life is taking you? Do we wonder if we're ever going to get married? Do we wonder if we're going to get into the school that we want to get into? Do we wonder if we're going to be able to buy the house that we need? How we're going to be able to prepare for retirement? Do we wonder and worry about these things? Do we worry about the health of those that we love? How many times do we call to him? How many times do we ask for him, who will answer us and show us great and mighty things which we do not know? So speak to God in the quiet place, and you will always be clothed with his goodness and his grace, okay? So the first point is speech. Speech. The second point is touch. So after Christ spoke to Thomas and spoke to the disciples, he told him, he said, reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. So he told Thomas, hey, take your finger and your hand and put them in the scars in my side. And Thomas had asked specifically for this. So what did we just say? Ask and you will be given. Call to me and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things. And Thomas said, I want to put my hand in the scar. I want to put my hand in your side. He said, okay, go do it. Here you go. So it's kind of cool. My wife and I, we went to Italy 5 or 6 years ago. And there's a church in Italy called the Church of Santa Croce. It's a very small church. And they have a number of relics. By the way, Italy has like all of the relics of the apostles. And so allegedly, I say allegedly because, everybody tells stories, but allegedly in one of the boxes that we saw a gold-plated finger. And it was the finger of St. Thomas. The finger that actually touched his side, okay? So, you just saw that, and it was unbelievable. I remember being there and telling Mary, I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. And, we just couldn't believe that was there. But the Catholic Church, God bless them and keep them for many years, they were able to keep so many of the relics of the apostles for so many years. And so if you ever have a chance to go to Italy, I encourage you to go to that church. But it just tells you how special and blessed that finger was, that this finger, remember, St. Mary Magdalene, what did she want to do? She wanted to touch Christ on the day of resurrection, and he said, nope, you can't touch me, okay? I have not yet ascended to my Father. And yet, what does he tell Thomas? Touch me. Still a glorified body. Still a glorified body. But how Thomas asked for this. Now, why was it important for Thomas to feel the scars of Christ? St. Gregory the Great tells us that the wounds of Thomas's unbelief could only be healed by touching Christ's wounds. Only be healed by touching Christ's wounds. And when we touch Christ, we are healed, just like the woman with the flow of blood and every other healing miracle that he did. And so if we call to him, we need to embrace him. We need to embrace him. So when he comes to us, we should embrace him, and you don't call someone to send them away. So how do we touch God? Okay, we don't have the glorified body just kicking it here with us, right? So how do we touch God? First and foremost, take communion. Every time we take communion, we experience his body and his blood. The sacrament of communion is life. It is union with him. Okay? If you think about a union with someone, I can think yani engagé, and you're holding hands together, right? This is the closest we get, is to be able to take communion. And the other thing is to open your Bible every day. Your Bible is a physical God. Your Bible is a physical God. So open it every day, even for a moment, even for a verse. One verse with the Lord is one moment for him to touch you and for you to touch him, and for your unbelief and my unbelief to be healed by his strength. In the book of 2 Timothy, chapter 2, verse 15, Paul says to Timothy, "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." What he really means here is work at connecting with him. Work at connecting with him. Work at staying unified with him. Touch him when you can. And so we should embrace him with the work of our hands. And when we do so, we will feel his healing according to his plans. And so the first point that we have in order to connect with God and to experience him the way St. Thomas did is speech. And we do this speech through prayer. And the second is touch, and we do this through communion and the Bible. Okay, and now if you haven't paid attention the first 12 minutes you've been waking up, this is the point to wake up, okay? Is the sight. Sight. And so we always talk about the sight and seeing God. And we actually tease Thomas for being a doubter and needing to see Christ to believe in his resurrection. The argument is that he should have believed. St. Paul says in the book of Hebrews that faith is belief in the unseen, right? St. John Chrysostom tells us that the disciples testified to Thomas and he would not believe them until he not only saw but touched Christ. So Thomas is guilty of wanting to see Christ himself to believe. His faith not being strong enough to believe in the resurrection until he saw Jesus himself. But I would submit that we are also guilty of a weak faith, just like Thomas. Because we demand to see Jesus the way we want to see him as well. He said, I want to see him and I want to touch him. It was very specific what he wanted. And in our lives, we are very specific about how God needs to show up for us, right? That God shows up when he grants us that relationship. When God shows up when we get into that school. God shows up when we buy that house. God shows up when we have that child. God shows up when this person doesn't die or isn't sick anymore. Sadly, the way we want to see Jesus is the way the Pharisees did. Because the Pharisees wanted a miracle. They said, hey, if you're a big shot like you said you are, why don't you come down and have your angels save you? We wanted him to come down on a cloud. Or worse, to be our genie. The Pharisees wanted a king that would come on earth and overcome their captors, overcome the Romans. That's what the Pharisees wanted. And guys, for us, we do the same thing. God, we know you're powerful. We know it's your will. We know it's this. We know it's that. But I really like this girl. I think we should get married, even if, things aren't working. And if it doesn't, I don't know if you're really there. And I really want to get into this school. And if I don't, are you really there? I did everything I could. Why am I not there? And how did I lose my job? I've worked hard and been a good person. And the problem is we don't want to struggle. We don't want to wait for God's goodness. And so what we do is we want these material things. We want these material things that we think will make us happy and liberate us. But Christ tells us how to see him. Christ tells us how to see him. And so the thing that I want everyone to listen hard to here now, this is it right here. If you want to see your God, and I want to see my God, Christ told us how to do it very clearly in the gospel. Told us very clearly how to do it in the gospel. He says that when we see the poor, when we see the orphan, when we see the needy, and when we see the broken, and when we see those that are weak, we see Christ. And he says, and he tells us what to do in those moments, to minister to those people as we would minister to Christ. To treat those people as the woman with the alabaster flask treated Christ, getting on her knees and washing his feet with her hair and her tears. I would submit that the modern church, the modern Coptic church, is a church that has expected and become spoiled by the apparition of St. Mary at Zaytun. We are spoiled by the miracles that Pope Kyrillos did. We're spoiled by these things. This generation still talks about it. I see pictures, I hear amazing stories. I'm jealous of all of you that saw it. But these were how the faith of the church was rebuilt. This is how the church's faith was rebuilt. So it's not bad that we want to see these signs. But what's bad is when we ignore others as we wait for these signs. When we don't go out of our way to tend to those less fortunate than us. And I would submit that even if you can't do it outside, if you can't go to a homeless shelter, you can't do this, I mean, don't even worry about evangelizing. I want you to evangelize. Evangelize meaning the external, evangelize meaning the internal. Within this church, within these four walls, there are people here today that are in pain. There are people here today that are suffering. There are people here today that do not have. There are people here today that struggle. Each one of us carries a unique cross. Okay? And if you don't have to open your pocket to give them money, the least we can do is to look at them when they're alone and ask about them. And if they're not here, text them and check on them. It is a church. The church is a hospital, The church is a hospital, as St. John Chrysostom says. It is a place of healing. And the healing does not just come through the mysteries that are on the table. They come through the work of the people. The word liturgy is work of the people. How many of us here today will pray for someone other than somebody we know? We have half a liturgy to do it. I hope each one of us does it. How many of us here will see someone standing by themselves at the end of this liturgy and say, "Hi, you look new here. My name is Andrew. How are you? Where are you from?" And it's not just if they speak Arabic. It's not just if they know hymns. It's not just if they're a deacon. It's any person that is here. He says, "Come to the least of me and serve the least of me, and then you will see me because I am manifested in the least." The reason that we see Christ in these people is that we live love in those moments. And when you live love, you live God. And when you live God, you see God. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, 7 and 8, the prophet says, "Break your bread for the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house. If you see a naked man, clothe him. Nor shall you disregard your offspring in your own household. Then your light shall break forth as the morning, and your healing shall spring forth quickly. Your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of God shall cover you." And I will leave us with this quote from our own patron saint, St. Augustine, when he says, "What does love look like? It has the hands to help others. It has the feet to hasten to the poor and needy. And it has the eyes to see misery and want. This, my brothers and sisters, is love. This is how we see God in the least, in those who carry a cross and feel alone. And so the ways that we experience Christ, as Thomas did in this beautiful Resurrection Sunday, number one is speech through prayer. Number two is touch through the Bible and communion, and sight through service. May each one of us be elevated today to see him in the least of us and to tend to those who are weak and to be a manifestation of his goodness and his grace on this earth. And glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.